Hi, folks. Steven here. So, as you can see, I am here with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and we're going to be doing yet another one of our Pokemon music discussions. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the music of Pokemon Channel for the GameCube, a very interesting title to say the least. But before we get to that, while we're waiting for hopefully folks to come in for the live stream, you're always welcome to come to one of these. We do these about once a month. Wanted to go over a few little pieces of Pokemon music news. First off, obviously we're coming up close to Christmas, and the Pokemon Kids YouTube channel, it's separate from the main Pokemon channel that has all the release announcements, recently put out a thing regarding it's a cover of Winter Wonderland, complete with like a CGI music video and stuff like that. And what were your kind of thoughts on this one?
It was really cute. I kind of enjoyed the way they worked lines of the song to find ways to correspond to different Pokemon. Like Articuno is the bluebird, and Parson Brown, I think it was a Sudowoodo or something. Like they just found ways to tie it in for little kids to notice fun things. I could not find the singer because I thought that was very interesting. I would have liked to know more about her. Honestly, her voice sound and the way she enunciated things sounded a little bit like Vocaloid Cyber Diva, but I'm pretty sure it was a real human being. And I would be interested to know where she is from and what her career is like when she's not singing cover songs.
Yeah, this was a music video featuring Pikachu and Eevee, and they were out and about in this Winter Wonderland, of course. And I didn't see any production credits. I tried looking for a description. Since it's on their kids channel especially, it's also listed as for kids, as in, not as in the defunct company, as in it's restricts some of the stuff that you can do on YouTube with that video. So like there are no comments or anything. So it would be great to know who actually did that. But it very nice CG on there. I suspect it was done by maybe the same folks who did like stuff for Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, although the models are a little bit different than what you see there. But it has not a totally dissimilar aesthetic and stuff. Maybe I suppose it's also possible it was outsourced to something. It's a decently well produced music video in that regard. I did a little research to figure out what the status of Winter Wonderland is. I can't say precisely what the copyright status of that is, but I was kind of curious about this. This was something they had to actually pay for, and apparently, the original version was written by two guys. One of them died like a year or two after publication in like 33 or 34. And then the other guy who wrote it, either the lyrics or the melody, I forget, died in 1944. And copyright generally lasts for works done by a small group of people or an individual 75 years after the death of the person. So 44 plus 75 equals 119, if I did my math right there. So it would be within the last year or so that song, possibly. I don't know. There's always these little catches and stuff, and of course, newer versions people have made changes and stuff, and those technically still are under copyright and stuff. But as far as like the original version of the song, I think that would have expired within the last year or so.
Yeah, Felix Bernard and Richard Bernhard Smith co-wrote it together in 1934. So possibly.
Like I said, I forget exactly what status it would fall under based on when it was originally published and since then. But and it does vary by country, of course, a little bit. So that might, it's not that old of a song. It's not new by any means, but it's not that old either. I did check that, so I didn't want to get my hopes up that they would start partnering with like music companies and doing these types of videos for other things, but you never know, they might in the future. But this one is one they probably did not have to pay rights to any estate for. In that particular regard. So I kind of wanted to mention that. So check that out if you haven't. It's obviously it's very much aimed at a very young audience, but it's very well made and good audio design, good visual design on that, and I like that. All right, so I guess the other piece of Pokemon music news I wanted to get out of the way before we do our actual discussion is apparently within the last week or two, folks have noticed that a number of Japanese Pokemon songs are now available on digital services. So this is stuff like the iTunes Store, Apple Music, Spotify, stuff like that. The way this usually works is if there's a case where there is like a single that has a Pokemon version and a non-Pokemon version, it seems like the non-Pokemon version is the one that's on there. Like there was something by Shoko Nakagawa, and I think someone said that one of the versions of V from Generation 6 or whatever it was is on there. And if you dig through, some other stuff has been there a while. Like, you can't get the Power of One on any of the digital services, but you can totally get the Japanese Twat Ma strange world we live in. Although I guess you can also get, like, if you know where to look, most of the music from the 93 Mario movie as well, but doesn't always coincide with the success or failure of the movie as to what is actually available there. But Anne, I don't know how much digging you've done on your end on this. I just looked kind of briefly for a few things I knew about. What about you?
I've not had the chance to do much digging myself, but I know that in the past I've been frustrated as I've tried to make up various playlists of oh, this version of the song isn't here. This one is. Mamoru Bekimono was one where I never found the movie version of it. So this might be a fun little rabbit hole for me to do over Christmas break, is to see which songs are newly available on my streaming services that were not before.
Yeah, the other reason this might be interesting for me is, well, technically I've been trying to buy fewer physical goods because of all the space they take up and the fact that, like last year or whatever, I had to move my CD cases. I have a zillion of them from various things I've bought over the years, Pokemon and otherwise. And that was not a lot of fun, so I've been actually trying to cut down on some of that. But I've largely avoided doing unboxings of Japanese music because if the music isn't on YouTube, then you just get a bunch of people who are kind of not finding what they're looking for. They watch 3 seconds of your video, realize it's not the song itself, and then click off. And maybe this will change some of that. Not super confident that we're going to see anything from like the upcoming, like the Japanese score / vocal album for Secrets of the Forest, Coco, comes out like later this week and stuff like that, as the movie comes out on Christmas in Japan. And so we'll kind of see how all that shakes out. But first of all, I wouldn't be surprised if the dubbed version of that movie uses a replacement score, partially based on the feedback. If you read some reviews of Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, if they mention the score, they more often than not were not saying favorable things about it. But that's something that sort of, I guess, ties into that topic and is we'll know more about in the future, I suppose. But Anne, any thoughts on any of that stuff I just spouted out there?
It's just all stuff to look forward to, all very exciting, and I'm always on team, release everything everywhere, always, just because we live in a global world now. So, but as we've said on this podcast, there are things with licensing that are often happen outside of the fans' perspective that we don't understand, but it's very promising to see that maybe some of those hurdles are being jumped over and we can all enjoy the same things together.
All right. Well, we got a listener in the chat room there, Biozilla. Thank you very much for coming in here. We're doing sort of a little bit of a pre-discussion right now, but asked what our favorite side game is. That's kind of hard to narrow down. If you're asking musically, I think the best side game / series is going to be the Mystery Dungeon stuff, which we will get to. We should be getting to the first entry in that sometime next year, since the first entry in that series is a late third gen game. We should be getting to that sometime probably in the first half, maybe. I forget. There's a lot more third gen side games than there are from the first gen. from the second gen, which only had like 2 for whatever reason.
Pokemon Conquest might be the one I've played the most of.
Yeah, that's a 5th gen is also kind of a small one for side games. I forget where like I think that's a 6th or 7th. I forget which one that is, but 5th gen I think is also very small for the number of side games versus 3 and 4, and then some of the later stuff.
True.
Yeah, so let's see.
What's your favorite side game? As long as you're in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like he gave us another comment about Mystery Dungeon. He hasn't had much experience with it, but I strongly recommend. I would actually start with the remake that recently came out on Switch at the beginning of the year. That's a very good entry point into the series. You can also get the first couple games that were on Game Boy Advance and DS. You can get those on the Wii U Virtual Console. I believe those are still up there. So those are also an option. And of course, you can get both of the 3DS ones. You can get those off the eShop there too. So kind of interesting stuff. Going back to the story about Japanese Pokemon music being on the digital service providers in at least North America, probably other places as well. I had asked if anyone knew why that was, and I thought maybe Japan had passed something similar to a piece of legislation that was passed a year or two ago in the U.S. and goes into effect soon. In the U.S., we have this thing called the Music Modernization Act that should go into effect next month, which should smooth over some of the logistical stuff for it. But apparently that this is like a new contract that Sony Music Japan signed with some of the DSPs, or digital service providers, or digital sound providers, or something like that. I forget exactly what it stands for, but basically stuff like Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, stuff like that, that allows their, and that seems to be a little more permissive. So, although I tend to skew more towards the Western Pokemon music, doesn't mean I don't like the Japanese music or don't want it to be available. I do caution to, folks who are more on the Japanese side that it isn't going to make people suddenly flock all to it. A lot of it is quite good, but it's, stuff like that. So, but temper your expectations in that regard. Okay, well, I think that covers about what we're going to get here. If you have any comments coming along here, it looks like, let's see, it hasn't quite percolated. It's easier. I have 2 computers in front of me in case you're wondering how this works. One of these is my presentation computer over here on my left. And the other one is a monitoring computer that I use on the right. And there you go. It takes a little while for the chat comments. They show up on my thing that's monitoring the stream over there more quickly than the one that's actually broadcasting. Let's see. Soft spot for Rumble Blast. Well, we'll definitely be talking about that because there is a little bit of a chain of stuff going from this game to the Rumble series. Such as it is over the subsequent decade or whatever after this game came out. All right, well, Anne, I think we should get started with our actual discussion. So let's get our recording stuff ready.
Ready and waiting.
All right. So yeah, we don't just use this stream to do our things. The reason our podcast feed sounds so much nicer than what you're probably hearing here with all its little breakups and stuff is that we use digital voice recorders to record each side. Figured I would show that off for once. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and hit record. So I have a recording of Anne's side and my side. She likewise has some access to it. But okay, our levels look good. And I hope Biozilla will let us know. I think we did prejudge our levels in a test stream about an hour ago. But I think things are going to be kind of hopefully okay now. So what we do here is I got to punch up my notes first of all. Because that's the other way we prepare for this. All right. And leave a little pause, and I will do an introduction, and we'll sort of proceed from there. If you have any comments on stuff to talk about, on a particular song or stuff like that, go ahead and type that in. We will try and work that into the discussion. All right, so leave a little pause, and I will do an introduction. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in the second third-generation side game we're discussing, this is another one of our music discussions, of course, Let me try that again. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and we're doing another Pokemon side game music discussion. We're working our way through the third generation, the Ruby and Sapphire generation, and we've come to our second game, and this is going to be Pokemon Channel for the GameCube. So this game has a bit of an odd reputation, a bit of an odd lineage, I guess you could say. It's a spiritual successor to Hey You Pikachu, but very critically maligned. And the music, to be honest, might be the most interesting part there. But let's get the basics done. But let's get the basics down first of all. So this was released in, let's see, about midway through 2003 in Japan, back in July. It actually came out there before Pokemon Pinball Ruby Sapphire that we talked about last time, but we go by North American release date order, generally speaking. Let's see, in North America it was released in December of 2003, and then in Europe they got it in April of 2004. And like Hey You Pikachu, this was developed by Umbrella, which more recently has done some of the Pokemon Rumble games. And if you've played those, you might recognize some of the music from Pokemon Channel without even having actually played it. Mm-hmm. And as I understand, you've never really played this game. What's sort of your history with this? Were you at all interested? How'd you find out about it?
I was passively interested. It was kind of the same with Hey You Pikachu. Like, it came out at a time when I did not own a console. So, you had to be very judicious, and you're renting stuff from the local video game store. It did not... I was interested, but not enough to basically shell out money for it at that time in my life. I grew more interested as I got older, but again, just still didn't. Again, time, money, you prioritize. I've watched it now that we have YouTube online, which we were joking earlier. Basically, that's playing it, right? So.
Yeah, I don't want to be too harsh on it, but not the most interactive game ever. It does kind of, in some ways, sort of call back to the early days of CD-ROM gaming. But as far as my personal experience with this, the way I experienced this, I definitely asked for it and got it for Christmas, I'm pretty sure, of 2003. I remember playing it some, and yeah, I more or less realized it was kind of very much a novelty, and I guess thank you to my mom for giving me that one, because it was definitely aimed at a lower age group than I was in when I was in college at the time, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I think I enjoyed the musical aspects, which we'll talk about today a fair bit, quite a bit. But yeah, it's certainly on an interactive level. Well, we'll talk about that. We'll have a game discussion at the end of this, I guess is the best way to put it. As far as who actually worked on this, so there's sort of like, because of all the pre-recorded video content on it, that's kind of on the anime side, but there's also, of course, the game side. So there's kind of two people we wanted to talk about here. So for the in-game music, so the stuff when you're out and about in the world of the game, that is Miki Obata. Of course, we don't know if for sure it was her, but we're fairly certain she did the music for Hey You Pikachu as well. And also did a few games before that as well. So, 1 second, let me think. And, as we mentioned in our Hey You Pikachu discussion, she had done a few games before that, and since then, this is mostly what she's worked on. It seems like she might have been retired. She might have had a brief musical career back in like the 60s or 70s. We're not entirely sure if that's the same person either. I guess, Anne, anything new to report on Miki Obata?
Nothing new. I mean, it just seems like an odd trajectory. I want to believe that they're the same person. In my heart, they are, but they might not be. But since this game does kind of borrow some music and content occasionally from Hey You Pikachu, she also could just be credited through that way. So there's a lot of questions about her and her involvement here. Or his, because if they're not the same person, Mickey could be a gentleman.
Yeah, it's somewhat of an androgynous name, as we discussed back last time. Sorry, as we discussed a ways back with Hey You Pikachu. Now, on the anime side, of course, we'll be talking about some of the vocal songs that are in the animated short that is sort of a big feature of this game. But as far as like the background music, we kind of have two names for this. Jun Umebori or Atsushi Umebori. Let me sort of explain. So if you look in the actual credits of the game, which by the way take a long time to go through, Jun, Jun, is the romanization, is the name you'll get there. And I can't find anything else by that name besides this game. However, Atsushi Umebori is credited with doing music for the short of Pokemon Movie 5, which was, let's see, I forget exactly, Camp Pikachu is I think the English name of that, and that has the Pichu brothers in it. So it would totally make sense if he was, and I'm pretty sure it's a he, at least the Atsushi is, was brought in for this game as well as a direct follow-on there, since it would have come, shortly thereafter. Anne, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Nothing concrete. Like I did some digging myself, and kind of, as you say, it's possible they are the same person. It is not uncommon at all for people to use pseudonyms and pen names and stage names in the arts, and especially with music composition. I do it all the time to kind of sometimes separate your different styles and your different income streams and marketability and the like. They could very well. Jun and Atsushi definitely seem to kind of have similar-ish projects they've worked on. Pokemon Channel, Atsushi does a lot with anime and children's jingles especially. So it's very possible they are the same person, but it's hard to tell just because when you use a pseudonym and copyright things under a pseudonym, it doesn't always trace back where the public can see it.
Yeah, so kind of another question mark there. I think as far as Atsushi, Strike Witches was sort of one of the newer credits I found on there. Apparently he's now living in France, and he actually has a website you can take a look at that does list the Pokemon movie short for movie 5. So I guess that's another name. And then when we get to individual songs, we'll talk about who worked on those, because we are talking about both of the vocal songs that are part of the short later on in this discussion. Okay, so whenever we talk about a new system here, the tradition is that we sort of talk about the sound hardware of that system, at least a little bit. Last time around for the Game Boy Advance, last time around we talked about the Game Boy Advance sound hardware for Pinball Ruby Sapphire. This time, to be honest, there's not a ton to say about the GameCube sound hardware. We're turning into the 21st century, and at this point, sound hardware looks a lot like it does today. From a technical specification, like the GameCube audio supports a full 16-bit digital sound processor. So we talked last time that Game Boy Advance music can sound kind of hissy because it only has like 8 bits of depth. This has at least 16 here. Full 48 kilohertz, which is sort of the same the sampling rate used in like DVDs and stuff like that. As far as like sampled sound, it can do like 64 channels, has stereo output and stuff like that. So, it's very much a modern-ish sound system in there. So maybe not a ton to say there. But, with that out of the way, let's see here. How do I want to transition? So I guess with the technical stuff out of the way, what we usually do is that each of us, me and Anne, will each pick 3 songs that we're going to talk about during our discussion. Let's see. I picked Side by Side / We Are the Pichu Brothers. Let's see. I also picked the My Room / Home theme. And then the Ruins of Truth theme. Now, Anne, what were the ones you picked?
I picked Meowth Party the Relaxation Channel, and Mount Snowfall.
All right. Well, normally Ann and I would alternate on this. However, to keep these songs in loosely the order you would experience them in the game, we're going to do some of these back to back for us. So that's a little bit different than what we usually do. But this game has a definite progression sequence to it in terms of how you unlock stuff, on how you unlock stuff and how you go to places. All right, so let's kind of start out with let's start out with the vocal song that opens up the Pichu Brothers in Party Panic short. This is, one second, there we go. So this is Side by Side / We Are the Pichu Brothers. There's one interesting thing about this is the short, at least in the North American version, is available in both English and Japanese. Let's see. As far as the song's original composition and arrangement, that goes to Hirokazu Tanaka, the longtime musician, worked for Nintendo for many years and then transferred over to Creatures Inc. and has written a bunch of stuff for the anime. Now he's in more of a managerial role as the president of Creatures Inc., I believe. You'll see him at Pokemon events every now and again. So let's see, the English side was done, the lyrics were translated or adapted, I guess you could say, by Norman Grossfeld from 4Kids. And let's see, the English vocals were done by a guy by the name of Peter Thom, I think is how that's pronounced, who I did some research on, and he has a very interesting career that you should take a look at. His work goes everywhere from a movie called DC Cab, which was a movie starring Mr. T, and he's also done a ton of work with the Muppets. More recently, I'm not really sure exactly what he's up to. He's in his mid-70s now. I don't think anything's happened to him. Let's see. I have on the Japanese side, I have Akito Toda, and who's a regular person on the anime music side in Japan for Pokemon, and then Endo Kumiko. Do you have some information on who that person is?
On Endo Kumiko? Not a ton, but here, let me pull up my notes. I'll show you what I got. Yeah, Akihiro Toda is a very usual person to show up on this. She's Endo Kumiko is another one who it's kind of hard to separate her. Kumiko is not an uncommon name, and neither is Endo as a last name. Trying to compare the kanji, because they are so common, even that, I'm not sure if I can separate them. There is a Kumiko Endo who is in the entertainment world, who is an actress, done a lot of dramas, but she's also a voice actress. It's hard to separate her. I don't see a lot of credits, though, for video game composition work and a music career outside of her seiyuu and acting career, as a vocalist. So I don't think it's the same person. Kumiko Endo, whoever they are, if they're not this lovely lady, is kind of an unknown. There's not a ton of information on her, not a ton of IMDb.
Okay, I did find some of that same stuff. There's there's a series called Special Investigation 9 that apparently someone, at least with the same name, does play a recurring character who's shown up a few times, and also in a predecessor series as the same character. So maybe or may not, it's not unheard of for someone to have a role in singing and also in voice acting. Mm-hmm. So they could well be the same person, but yeah, Japanese names, one problem we run into is that they're not as distinct or unique as Western names tend to be, especially here in America, where we have a lot of different name origins for different folks depending on where their ancestors are from. But with that being said, let's sort of talk about the style of this song then. I sort of put down that it has a vaudeville / ragtime vibe, very much an early jazz type of deal. And the instrumentation, there's a piano and some old timey instrument stuff. And was that, I'm guessing that's what you recognized as well, right?
Yeah, definitely like ragtime, like an old piano roll sort of situation, like you know, stereotypical old time western where we walk into the bar and the piano's going and who knows what's about to go down. It's an interesting choice. This song, I don't say I dislike it, but it is a hard choice that somebody made, and yeah.
It was definitely made with deliberate intent, I think is the word you're kind
Yes.
of looking for there, or the phrase or whatever. But one interesting thing, you may have noticed that the Japanese singer definitely female, the English singer definitely male, and this is also there's also international versions from when this game was put out in Europe. But first of all, the song is in different keys. You may notice the piano is a little bit pitched differently because, of course, those two folks have very different vocal ranges and kind of different singing styles. Peter on the English side is very much a gravelly, old-timey voice there, versus Endo, more of a bright female voice. Is that about right, Anne?
Yeah, and yeah, that's not uncommon. Like when a female covers a traditionally male song or vice versa, usually the key has to be adjusted. I have found this out the hard way in all of my vocal lessons.
But it still kind of works for both of them. I guess maybe the male voice, the way that performance goes, is a little more what you would expect. I'd love to know how this all came about. I do wonder if Peter's work with the Muppets is eventually how folks like Russell Velazquez ended up working on Sesame Street and stuff like that. But let's kind of talk and move on to talk about the lyrics of this song, though. Obviously, it gives a very much an introduction to the Pichu brothers, because not everyone saw the shorts from the third or the fifth movie or the one or two other things the Pichu brothers were on. So it sort of explains their daily life and the world they live in. I think it does a pretty good job. Anne, I assume you agree with that?
Yeah, it's very cute. It kind of introduces them as characters, and it's just talks about being just a fun life that they're living. The two of them, they make fun wherever they go. It's an amusement park without the need of a ticket, as they say.
Yeah. Animals in urban areas always kind of an interesting experience. With the pandemic earlier this year, when folks were staying inside a lot in the spring, that we noticed that animals were sort of coming out and being a little more brave. So I think we get a little taste of that here as well. One other thing I want to know is this isn't the only place this song appears. There's a short, which I think may have come out before this game, that this I think was originally written for on the Japanese side, which later became part of Pokemon Chronicles. There's a couple of Pichu Brothers episodes, and I think one of them has either an extended version of this song or an alternate version of this song or something like that. So this is not the only place this song appears. But I think it gets the short off to a very good start and sort of gets your attention, and works pretty well there. I think, Anne, I think you're in agreement there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, normally we would alternate on these, but chronologically, the next song, or maybe even before this one, but around the same time as you see this first part of this anime short, is that you get to experience one of the game's themes, which is the My Room / Home theme. So this one is, I wouldn't call it, I don't think sparse is quite the right word, but it's really just like a solo piano, but yet it still manages to fill things pretty well. It's got this, friendly, peaceful vibe, and, it's much slower. And what were your sort of your thoughts on this track?
Well, I'm surprised you say friendly because my first thought was, oh my gosh, why is this song so sad? It's like just feels like, oh my gosh, we need someone to talk in the background so this oppressive silence and aloneness doesn't crush my soul. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful track. I love the use of the piano, but there's a melancholic at sort of side to it, I feel. So maybe it's all perception. Maybe it depends on what mood you're in when you sit down to play, whether it's a friendly vibe or like I'm really lonely.
I'll give you that. It can definitely be interpreted that way. I think the melody also has a bit of a swaying back and forth vibe. I think sort of one of the biggest things about it, though, is that it is very much a contrast to most of the music used on the like actual like TV programming within the game, which is both in the short and also on some of the other channels there, which is much more energetic and stuff. And I think that was part of the reason it was composed this way. It is sort of, there are things you can do in the room that are not playing the TV, like you can point at things for Pikachu to look at, which, this is another Pikachu game in case you hadn't caught that. But, and there's some other things you can explore, but it in a way, it does encourage you to go out and do stuff or to stay in and watch TV, which is a little bit of an odd dynamic. But like I said, I'm trying to remember exactly how the equivalent theme for the room theme in Hey You Pikachu goes, and it's definitely different than this. But it's the room itself fills a very similar purpose. Any other thoughts on this track, Anne?
Well, now that you bring it up, that might, be a very smart choice to make the room a very peaceful, kind of relaxing sort of track, very soft and very different, compared to all the other tracks you're going to hear in this game. That sitting in the room deciding what you're going to watch is a very different experience. There's something very creative in that. So I do appreciate that now that you've pointed it out.
All right. Well, before I hand it off to you, Anne, I did want to briefly mention one of the folks. Let's see, what is it? Oh, BioZilla in the chat room mentioned. Let's see, Pikachu and Pichu takes place during 2020 confirmed. But so yeah, we do broadcasts, or we do live streams of these that have all our little gaffes and mistakes in there as well. If you ever want to check those out, but anyway, Anne, moving on. But moving on, Anne, why don't you talk about the first of your songs, Mount Snowfall? There's a bunch of places you can go in the game as it opens up, but this is one of them. Tell us about the song.
Well, I picked Mount Snowfall because it is a winter time of year, and this song sounds like Christmas to me. It has a very jingle belly type vibe to it. Or we just talked about walking in a winter wonderland. There are jingle bells. There is kind of just that bright, light, energetic feel to it, and the music itself. It's kind of catchy. Like it repeats a general phrase in loop, but I like how it builds, because even though it's kind of repeating the same phrase, then the second verse kind of repeats it again. It adds more instrumentation. It adds in like a stronger beat and a fuller sound. It's just a very satisfying track, and just gives you a very pleasant feel to it.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, by the time this gets out to the podcast feed, it'll probably be spring, but or maybe even summer. But that's okay.
It'll be Easter, and that's basically Christmas, so we're fine. We're fine. Snowing somewhere.
I definitely agree with a lot of that. I have some of my own notes. Obviously, there are bells in it, and some descending notes, which is always, we had talked in the Hey You Pikachu about the ochre area, which had descending chromaticism, which I guess there was supposed to be falling leaves. Here, I guess it's falling snow. So kind of a similar thing, but the instrumentation much more amenable to the holiday time. And I specifically do mean the holiday time. If you compare it to stuff like some of the stuff in the Crown Tundra DLC from Sword and Shield, that is a bit of a different breed than what we have here. So sort of the phrase that came up, though, I did want to also interject. The phrase that came up with this was mall during the holidays. because that's kind of the vibe I get musically from this track. There is stuff you can buy in this game, but that's back on TV. So that's kind of thing.
But
Any other
yes.
thoughts on this particular track?
No, you nailed it.
All right. Well, another one. All right. Well, you picked out another channel theme here, and it's the relaxation channel. I think this channel is probably one of the ones that gets the most flack in this game. But I'm guessing the music made you pick it for some reason. What was that?
Yeah, I found it to be really, really soothing. Thought like the little Mary interjecting was very cute. Kind of in the same Winter of Mountain Snowfall. It's a very satisfying track, but mostly like as I'm searching through the soundtrack, I often look through the YouTube commenters because that's where I find the people who really love the game seem to come out of the woodwork. And this was a track that got so many interesting comments on it of people talking about like their memories of leaving their GameCube on all night so that they could fall asleep to this music and waking up and seeing all the Mary that they didn't count and stuff like that. So I picked it just because even though it's kind of a track that, no one seems to like when you look at it on the internet in text, when you actually look at the places where this song exists on the internet, YouTube or SoundCloud or wherever that people have reposted it, there are plenty of people who love it, and it filled a little niche in their lives that makes sense to me that I could fall asleep very happily to this track and kind of just enough stimulation to feel happy with it without racing thoughts, but soothing enough that I could get a nice sleep.
Well, the two words I put in my notes were happy and hypnotic because there is just a little bit of a hypnotic quality to it. And I also want to mention that the bells give it somewhat of a light feeling, which makes sense because the whole gist of this particular channel is that you have a long series of Mareep jumping over a fence.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously, if we had heavier music, you wouldn't think they would be able to jump over the fence. So that does kind of need to be a little bit of a lighter tune, I suppose. Yeah, you had mentioned also about sort of the status of this the game soundtrack. There is obviously no official release. And furthermore, unlike Hey You Pikachu that has a sound test, this has a sound test, but you can only get to it through like a hidden debug menu that you need to use like an action replay to get to, and all that stuff. As such, the stuff you'll find online is either it's either going to have Pokemon voices over it often, or it's going to have some technical things because one of the people who did bother to go into the debug menu and sound test didn't have a perfect audio setup, I guess, and they kind of admit that in one of their comments. Let's see. But, going back to the relaxation channel, as far as the relaxation channel goes, I'm not sure I have that much else to say about it. It is one of the more simplistic channels on there. And it's one that's usually, like we said, brought up to sort of, especially mock this game. And any other considerations, I suppose?
We'll probably talk about more gameplay and the like later, but yeah, no, I feel like it was something a little bit different and seemed to have such a beloved, little niche fan base to it that I was very touched by it. So.
All right. Well, let's move back to one of my songs. One of the ones I picked out, "Ruins of Truth." Now, Annan picked out Mount Snowfall, one of the locations you can go to in the game, and one of the places within that is called the Ruins of Truth. And I figured I'd include this one part because in our Hey You Pikachu discussion, we totally spoiled the ending of that game. I figured we might as well do the same for its spiritual successor. So as you progress through the game, each day within the game or so, you get another piece of the Pichu Brothers animation short. And when it gets to the final part, it turns out, oh no, they lost the disc. And it wound up in the Ruins of Truth. So this is a place you go into. It's pitch black to start off with, pretty much. And, in contrast to the Hey You Pikachu end game, which I'll try not to completely spoil here, but it has a big emotional arc. This one goes for something a little bit different. It is a little bit creepy, spooky in there, and the music definitely supports it. It's got this kind of weird synth instrument, sort of the main thing there. And, there's kind of this, I called it a shimmering sound. And what were your sort of initial impressions of this track?
My notes say, and now for something completely different. Like, this is a hauntingly beautiful, like, synth track that's very simple, but still evokes a huge emotion with you. Like, it long sustained notes, and just like a very eerie, but not necessarily threatening feeling. So very good walking that line.
Yeah, it's got some like intermittent drums and stuff like that, but yeah, very sparse otherwise. It's not a super huge area either. You basically light a few objects and then you like answer questions. Then you get the disc back and you watch the end of that short. But yeah, as far as the actual music for the Runes of Truth, very fitting for such a dark, ominous location. Sorry, let me rephrase that a little bit, just give it an alternative in editing. But Runes of Truth, the music definitely fits the area there. It's very ominous and kind of dark to fit that nature of the game without being so much so that it would be really scary, but it's definitely there. All right, and you've got one more song pick. It's the other vocal song in here, and it's Meowth's Party. Now, this one has quite a history. It actually goes back to like the beginning of Gen 2 in Japan. Why don't you sort of fill us in on the history of this song?
Yeah, Meowth's Party. It actually came out in 1999, October, and it was kind of meant to be an ending theme. It's the Japanese seventh ending theme, kind of through the Orange Islands era. That's a word. Through the Orange Islands era, it replaced Riding on Lapras, and it did get transferred over to the English side and dubbed. If you listen to the soundtrack, like you'll hear Maddie Blostein's Meowth singing it. But it only survived as an actual ending theme in the US for 2 episodes. They aired, I think, the Japanese version once and the English version once after the next episode, and like neither were ever aired again on the WB network. I can't find anything that it's ever shown up ever since. So that's interesting. I'm not sure if they just had a bad viewer response or if they found something they liked more to replace it. But it's a kind of an interesting track because being an ending theme, it has a music video to go to it, and it kind of combines 3D computer graphics with the traditional 2D cel shaded. Not necessarily well, but it's an for 1999. This is an interesting experiment for the time. But to talk about it musically, it's kind of.
Well, actually, Anne, can we? This would be a good time for me to interject some information.
Do.
Okay. So just to sort of fill in what you were talking about there, back in the summer of 2000, Kids WB did a Pokemon Around the World feature where they had international versions of some of the songs from like To Be a Master and also like the opening Pokemon theme and other stuff that they would splice in to the opening and ending segments during that time period. And they even did this. They had the Japanese version at the end of an episode and also the English version at the end of the episode. And the timing is very interesting there because you'd mentioned sort of the 3D CG aspect of it, but in, I believe, around the summer of 2000, during a trade show called, I'm trying to remember, Space World, I think it is, that used to be around, what they did, that was the summer they did. They showed off some GameCube tech demos, which included a variety of things, including a like semi-interactive version of Meowth's Party running on GameCube hardware and stuff like that.
Fun.
And that sort of ties into sort of this. I think the thing that you actually see in the game is actually a series of pre-rendered video clips that it swaps between. There's like random stuff that can happen in there every time you play it, which is kind of neat. But yeah, so I felt that timing was part of the reason they did that. Both the Pokemon Around the World thing they did in the summer of 2000, and also timing with the GameCube tech demo to sort of get a little cross traffic back then. That's a little bit of speculation on my part, but there's your context there, Anne.
That's so cool. That makes a lot of sense.
All right, so you were about to talk about the music of it. Why don't you go ahead with that?
Yeah, I kind of feel that the music kind of follows that same slightly random feel of the animation. Like when I first listened to it, I kind of felt like YouTube accidentally recommended me some mediocre Dempa track music again. Like as the song goes along, like it kind of has that ragtimey sound of the Pichu brothers, but then it also devolves into, well, not devolves, it switches into a kind of a light, old-timey rock, bluesy rock sort of thing. And the backing instrumentals feels very like a strange cross between traditional children's music and Dempa music, which it just I didn't like it, but over listening to the course of this song, the lyrical rhyming and the energy of Meowth singing about him and his cohorts throwing this party to give everyone ice cream, their diabolical scheme, like it started to win me over. So I've very mixed emotions and confused feelings about this track, but I feel it kind of has that same bizarre energy that you get from watching the animation of, like, I'm not quite sure what this is. Is it 2D? Is it 3D? Is it this kind of music? This kind of music? And it kind of seems to live in its own little world. But it is fun. And like ultimately the song is fun. The CD for the original release is fun because it's kind of like Meowth as a rock star and, featuring Musashi and Kojiro on the poster behind him. So like it feels very Pokemon. Ultimately, it's a song that had, again, just some definite strong choices made. And at the end of it, you're having fun cheering with Meowth and Jesse and James and the Pokemon. So ultimately, I think it's a successful track for this game, but I still have weird feelings about it.
Well, yeah. The main portion of the song is definitely very much a rock track. Maybe not quite what you would expect in like the Western rock scene, but definitely guitars and stuff like that. I guess. What I want to say here is I vaguely remember the stuff from 2000, from the Pokemon Around the World, that version of it. But this is obviously where I have most of my experience with this song. Let's see. Not sure to make that transition, but you had mentioned the lyrics a fair bit there. As far as like the English lyrics, which again were written by Norman Grossfeld for this game, I think they really capture sort of the fun-loving side of Meowth, how even though technically he's a villain, every so often he likes to sort of just not spontaneously do things, but sort of like do something, I guess you could say, nice here, kinda.
Even if it pretends it's an evil scheme.
But no, the writing here on this translation, which I think is a little bit like the Pichu Brothers one, the two versions have basically the same things. I think Meowth's Party in English is a little bit, takes a few more liberties from the Japanese one in terms of content and stuff, but it definitely fits.
Yeah, it's a little bit. The lyrics for the Japanese version is kind of in the same way that Meowth in Japanese tends to be a little bit more philosophical. So he's not trying to pass it off as a scheme, basically, but he's inviting everybody for ice cream, and his obsession with the moon is going very strong in this song. But it's still kind of got that fun spirit of we're going to bring everybody together and we're just going to have a party.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to our discussion regarding the moon scene in Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, but I think it's probably better that we move on from that bit of a dead horse. All right, well, that kind of covers the tracks we wanted to talk about. Let's give sort of our overall impressions of the music of this game. Obviously, you do kind of have the two halves because there's stuff for the short, but there's also in-game stuff. The in-game stuff, very much sounds like stuff from Hey You Pikachu, a little more evolved in terms of instrumentation, because they could do a little bit more on the GameCube than they could on the N64. But sort of the thing I came up with here is I think the music may well be the most interesting part of this game. And game for a lot of folks is in quotation marks for this one. But regardless of what you think of the final product, you have to say that at least musically they did put a lot of effort into it. And is that sort of your thing? Do you have other observations?
Very similar. It's kind of, we talk a lot on this show ever since, we were doing the ending movie themes about whether or not a song fits the purpose it was meant to do. And this is kind of a strange situation where we're not entirely sure what the purpose is because it is a game, but it is also a viewing experience, but not fully formed in that way. So it's kind of, the music, as you say, is definitely the most interesting thing about it. And the tracks are nice, but when you kind of evaluate it in the sense of like, does it do what it was meant to do? It's harder to evaluate it on whether or not it was a successful track or whether it's a successful soundtrack, because the audience is left with a little bit of a question mark as to what the purpose was. But as far as video game music, just in the abstract sense goes, like, this is very nice music. It's very varied. There's a lot of different things to it. But since it doesn't necessarily translate to different gameplay experiences in the same way, it, again, it puts a bit of a damper on how you feel about it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I suppose if we're comparing to Hey You Pikachu, one of the differences is there's not as much of a repeating theme in the music for this game as in Hey You Pikachu. Hey You Pikachu has that comment. This one, there is the Pokemon Channel jingle that shows on some of what are called eye catches, if I remember correctly, in between programs where it's the that one that Pikachu eventually will start singing along with, which is another little fun aspect. The voice acting, which I guess we should just briefly mention here, this is still in the 4Kids era, so it's mostly those folks, is about what you would expect there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Ikue Otani, so...
So yeah, if you're going to appreciate something from this game, it'll probably be the musical aspects and some of the visual presentation. It's hard for me to recommend. We'll save some of our other thoughts for the game discussion in the post segment. But next up, we've got some feedback I want to go over. So give me a second to punch that up.
Punch away.
Okay, I need to actually start the PowerPoint here, so 1 second here.
No worries. See who's all in the chat while we're waiting.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who showed up and watched this. You can always leave a comment on these. Let me just do a proper introduction here for that. Okay, well, with the game music discussed, we have a little bit of feedback to go over. Just a reminder, if you are ever attending one of these live, you can certainly give us comments in there, and we'll try to work those into the discussion. Otherwise, you can always give us a comment on one of our videos, or you can drop me an email at pokepress@gmail.com. and we'll try to include those in a future discussion. We love getting that, some of the best stuff we get. Okay, so just the day that we recorded this, we got, so just the day we recorded this, I got some comments on, our discussion of the music of Giratina and the Sky Warrior, specifically part 2 of that. That was before we started doing these live streams, so it's posted up there. These are 2 comments that we got from, Jacob Persico. I hope I said that about right. But first of all, Jacob, thank you very much for commenting, and thank you for putting in little timestamps on there. You know, you can always type in a timestamp in a comment you're leaving on a YouTube video. This is any video, and they'll create a little clickable link to a part of that video. So for our discussions, you can use that. First comment is, So as far as the first time point he has, It says, thank you. I'm trying to track down that music video, the Pokemon Coloring Contest version of Stay With This Finger. Now that I know it's on the Japanese movie DVD, that helps. So glad to be of service there. And then his other comment is that The Power of One is a very pretty song with good meaning. And, very much I agree with that. Power of One, I think, Power of One, I consider to be the best English ending theme song for the Pokemon franchise thus far. There are some other very good contenders, but I'm not sure exactly where I wanted to go with that. 1 second. Sorry about that, folks.
But we agree with you, Jacob. We agree with you is where...
Okay. Let me redo that sort of transition there. Not a ton to say on either of those comments, but we definitely appreciate them, and I more or less agree with the Power of One comment there. That's a standout song, even if it hadn't gotten misappropriated by American politics. But yeah, like I said, any comments you have on this or any other discussion, please do give us those. We love getting those, and they really help us out. All right, well, that kind of does it for Pokemon Channel as far as our music discussion. What are we going to be talking about next? Well, we go in English release order of these side games, and the next one happens to be Pokemon Colosseum, also for the GameCube. Yeah, this one is more of a traditional Pokemon game. It's sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of a combination of elements from the main games with a little bit of Pokemon Stadium thrown in there. It sort of takes the place of the Pokemon Stadium games from Gen 1 and 2, but it also has a story mode that functions as a game unto itself. And we'll be talking about the music of that. We're going to be able to talk about, Tsukasa Tawada, who has a long history with the Pokemon franchise, starting here, I believe. But I'm looking forward to talking about that. And I don't know if you have any experience with this game. It shows up pretty frequently at events and stuff. Have you ever played it?
I have played it. Not extensively, but I have. I'm very excited too.
Well, that'll be a very different type of game and a very different type of music than what we had today. But until next time, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
All right, folks, thanks. All right, so leave a little bit of a pause here, and then we're going to go to our game discussion for Pokemon Channel. I have a few things to bring up there.
Yeah, I imagine we'll have all kinds of thoughts about this game.
Yeah, it's... Okay, well, it's time to talk about Pokemon Channel as a game, and like I said earlier, a lot of folks like to put that in quotes in this particular case. But I had mentioned earlier, it kind of harkens back to the early days of CD-ROM gaming on console and on computers, where, they had to use all the little tricks there to have, high-quality audio and full-motion video and stuff like that. I think it's better than a lot of the stuff that you would see on, the Sega CD from, folks like Digital Pictures that had very minimal interactivity. This has got a bit more interactivity and, a bit more heart and soul put into it, even if it wasn't clearly wasn't enough for a lot of reviewers. But Anne, what are your sort of thoughts on that side of it?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. My first was, remember back when you used to be able to get like cartoon episodes, like episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff on a cartridge for your Game Boy Advance. I think the PSP also did something similar at one point. So it kind of I didn't, cross-reference these timelines or anything, but it kind of struck me as something very similar to that, only with a bit more interactivity. So it could be that this game was intended to be a very experimental exploration into what exactly the future of gaming was and game consoles. And now we have consoles where they basically are your DVD players and your cable almost. So, I'm as an intellectual exercise, this game is interesting in that sense to me. As someone who watches a lot of Japanese television, I find that aspect very interesting as well. But I would have loved to be a fly on the wall at the developmental meeting for this game. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, from what I understand and what I've heard various places, they were trying to sort of get a game that was specifically designed for the younger end of the market, so like the early elementary school folks who were maybe a little bit disinclined to go straight into the main series Pokemon games, maybe felt those were a little too intimidating and wanted something that sort of, got them there. You do need to have basic reading skills to play this game, although the short has voice acting. Most of the other stuff is subtitled, so you do kind of need that. But if you're comparing this to stuff like, I don't know, it was definitely not Night Trap, I can tell you that much. Or Make My Video or stuff like that. It's got more to it than that. But to be honest, I think Hey You Pikachu, the voice recognition, even though it wasn't always super reliable, I think was a better gimmick in terms of gameplay. Yes, it had problems with accents and certain stuff like that, and it was barely released outside. It wasn't released outside of the U.S. and Japan and stuff like that. But I think that gave it a little more value in terms of it was something interesting to try. Versus this is I don't know. Do you kind of get what I'm going for there, Anne? I'm not sure.
I agree. Yeah, whatever they were experimenting with in this game, I don't necessarily feel it was a success. It's very interesting to me as a looking back on it, time capsule-y sort of thing. But I don't think many people would think of this game as a success.
Well, sales-wise, it definitely wasn't. I mean, it's not as if they could have redone Hey You Pikachu, 2 on this if they had wanted to. I think there is at least one GameCube game with a microphone. Forget if it's Odama or something else. That's also a very interesting mishmash game there. But given the sort of reception this game got both critically and sales-wise, it's not hard to see why, starting on the Wii and going forward after that, the Pikachu-centric games have gone in a very different direction from what this or even what Hey You Pikachu was. We've got the Pokepark games on the Wii where you are Pikachu and you're just exploring around an area and you meet friends and do stuff like that. And then, of course, you've got the whole Detective Pikachu. Well, it's supposed to be a series. We're still waiting for the second game, which I'm guessing is part of the reason we haven't heard anything about a second movie lately. But I think, Anne, I think you have some experience. We'll talk about those games more in depth when we get to them, but I assume you agree that it's pretty easy to see why they went in a different direction with those games going forward.
Yeah, and, it's important to remember that sometimes when you try something new, it doesn't work. And, just because in our personal lives, our failures do not, get reviewed by people on podcasts, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to video game companies too. So,
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't so much of a failure that everyone from Umbrella got fired. They got put on different stuff. The next thing they did after this was My Pokemon Ranch for WiiWare and then the Pokemon Rumble games. So they might have been downsized, given that those are generally smaller games. But I don't think they were all thrown out on the street either, which I guess was kind of a nice thing to do. I also wanted to make a comparison here between, we talked about the Wii, we mentioned the Wii there, and, of course, that also uses sort of the channels metaphor. It's not completely derived from this game, but there are parts, like when you're moving the cursor around, that feel kind of like moving around on one of the Wii menus with the Wii remote. Seems like a more organic version of that. I don't know if there was any explicit, like if there was any code ported over or stuff like that. But it does seem like someone who worked on the interface probably at least had a little bit of experience with this game just from, it being a Nintendo game and stuff like that. What do you think, Anne?
Well, I hadn't noticed anything of the like myself, but everything builds on everything. And I like the thought that, again, this game was not a commercial success. Or even necessarily a cult classic type of success, but I like the idea that maybe some coding or some gameplay or some aspects of what they did while working on this game informed stuff the company did in the future. That's a natural part of development, and it would be very nice to think that they learned some positive things from this that they were able to bring to other games, even if the game as itself was not something that brings them fame and glory.
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to point that out. And then a couple loose ends, I suppose. Let's talk a little bit about the Pichu brothers. I mean, they had that short in the third movie. They had a short in the fifth movie. They had one or two things that would eventually become part of Chronicles, and they were in here. Now, since then, they don't show up too often. I was looking it up. The last time they showed up in any sort of Pokemon media in the Meloetta short, which I guess was back in Gen 5, so that's a pretty far distance at this point. They were seen in the audience somewhere or something like that. I don't know. Can you think of a reason why they kind of sort of disappeared after a while?
It's hard to say. Like, there was definitely a huge push to make them a marketing icon similar to Pikachu, and I think for a while that did work. Like, they were very recognizable. But I think kind of in the sense that, like, Ash's Charizard coming back in Unova was not for the children. That was for the adults, because the children don't remember they like a Charizard, but they don't remember Ash's Charizard or any of that journey. I think in that sense, the Pichu brothers kind of lose a little bit of their marketability as the Pokemon fan base, the anime fan base, replenishes itself every couple of years. And we lose a lot of kids who grew up and gain a bunch of kids who were born. And the Pichu brothers, a lot of their push came from the anime as a marketing icon to be equal with Pikachu. So as time goes by, they're just not as recognizable as a unit, I think.
Yeah, I also wonder a few other things, like have they been somewhat usurped by other electric rodents, because Gen 3 we got Plusle and Minun, Gen 4 you got Pachirisu, Emolga, Gen 5, and then Dedenne, and I forget what they did in Alola, and usually they must have something in Sword and Shield, but I forget. Usually they have I can see it now, the Togedemaru Maru in the Alola region, and I forget what, if anything, they've done for this new one. But yeah, I mean, the Pichu Brothers, there was actually a Pichu Brothers card in the trading card game. The most recent thing I can think of is in that Mystery Dungeon DX remake that came out early in 2020. You'll occasionally get a mission from one Pichu to rescue another Pichu, and I think they might refer to each other as brothers. So that might be a loose reference there. But I do kind of wonder if at one point they had grander plans for the Pichu brothers to sort of morph that into something bigger, and it just didn't quite happen. Okay, well, one other thing I do definitely want to mention before we head out on this is that this game, inside of it, you have this little thing called the Pokemon Mini, which was this weird little mini device, which I think might have served as a forerunner of the Pokewalker and the Wii U Fit Meter, but I'm not sure, called the Pokemon Mini, which had these tiny little cartridges, and it was never super popular. I have one back in my bedroom and whatever. That has like the one cartridge it came with. I guess I could have brought it out, but you can see it in this game, and they have a bunch of the little cartridges here. Anything to say about that little device?
Not a ton. Like, I didn't care for it. Like, I never owned it, for starters. Like, did this predated the pedometer that used to come with a Pokemon game sometimes, right?
Well, there was the mini Pikachu thing. Then there was this, and then when Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out, they came out with the little pedometer thing that you could generate watts on and transfer to the game. And then a couple of years later, when Wii Fit U came out, then you had the Fit Meter. I don't know how related all that hardware is, but it seems to be in sort of the same vein as a little thing you keep with you to do stuff with. But I did kind of want to mention that was actually helpful for some folks who were trying to like reverse engineer and figure out how the thing worked, was having that in this game. So I guess that's the other notable thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I seem to remember like little things like keychain pets and things you could take with you, but also pedometers. Like my research and experience, like a lot of that seems to come out of Japan and Asia. Like they seemed to be a lot more into tracking your steps and things like that, and having little things that you took with you long before we were in the West. That's largely apocryphal, because I've not done extensive research on that, but like it does seem in my experience that they were kind of more into that scene before we were. It very well could be that this is kind of, again, a way this game was just kind of experimenting with, like, so what could a video game be? What else could we do that's different, that maybe evolved over time into, you know, now we have like what's the 3DS had that like step street pass thing that you could do. And like it could have evolved into many different directions from like a little germ of an idea that was maybe not quite formed, but gave some information that spurred research and development later on.
Yeah, so a lot of threads coming into and coming out of this game. I think that's one of the themes I guess you can put in there, is that there's, like I said, a lot of things lead through Pokemon Channel, and I guess that's kind of just the nature of it.
Yeah.
All right, I think we can stop our recording there. So that went relatively well. Obviously, we had the usual number of stops and stutters in all of that. But thank you very much, everyone who came in here. If you still have some time tonight, I did ask permission before we did this live stream, but the Pokecasters Network is doing their own live stream that goes through about, well, let's see, goes through about 1 a.m. on Sunday Eastern time. So you got a couple more hours left of that. Where you can see they're raising money for Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh once again. And I don't know what they have left for stuff, but they're doing sort of a tabletop game, Pokemon-themed tabletop game with a bunch of folks who are battling against each other. I'm not sure exactly how far they've gotten. It's been a little while since I checked in, but do check that out. And, of course, you know, if you're seeing this way later, you know, Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh still probably exists, unless it got hit by a meteorite or something.
Probably needs
and,
help.
Very worthy cause out there in the western half of Pennsylvania. But thank you very much to everyone who came for this. I think, let's see, Biozilla mentioned that another thing that disappeared from the anime for a while was Jigglypuff, or Jigglypuff proper, which there was one in like late Gen 3, which I'm not sure if it really was the same Jigglypuff or not. I think it might be a different one, but eventually Jigglypuff Prime, or whatever, came back in one of the more recent seasons there.
Yes, it did.
Jigglypuff's in a bit of a different situation since it's a perennial Super Smash Brothers character. Obviously, Charizard shows up every now and again in the more recent games as well. So that kind of gives it another avenue there. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.